I will improve my videos, but I have worked all day, and I will comment the 10th paragraph of the introduction of the Encyclopedia. This is in the continuity of the previous videos in the playlist Encyclopedia, and I will make shorter videos. I will comment one paragraph at a time. So yeah, philosophical thought has to be grasped in its necessity and in its ability to grasp, to know absolute objects, freedom, spirit, God. And only God can know God, only God can be free, and only spirit can know itself. Translated into religious language, it means that what the Protestants believe, namely that there is no free will, because everything is ordained by God. So, yeah. Assertions, presuppositions, reasonings, etc. are contingent, because if we have one assertion saying that God is this or that, or God is the Father or whatever, there can be other assertions which are opposed. God is not the Father, he is the Son. God does not exist, there is no God. God is justice, God is love, whatever. You can have various assertions, and it means that what you express is contingent. But philosophy doesn't deal with contingency, but what is proven, demonstrated, and so philosophy has to prove its own content. And then there's a remark about critical philosophy, which basically refers to die Kritik der reinen Vernunft. I try to summarize Kant in 30 seconds. Kant says the metaphysicians of old have gotten wrong. They deluded themselves about their supposed knowledge of God, the object, the world, the soul, etc. Before trying to grasp what these objects are, we have to inquire about the faculties and the limits of reason, which is the transcendental ego, which is the immaterial thinking subject. So the philosophy of Kant, with the critic of pure reason, means reason thinking about itself. What am I? Not as an empirical, psychological, historical individual, but as a thinking subject. What am I? How do I think? What can I know? It took me quite a long time to realize that the transcendental ego is not the mind of Immanuel Kant. It is a universal ego. But, so yeah, the self in a history of philosophy is trans-historical. When Descartes says, I think, I am, it's not René Descartes, the 17th century thinker. It is reason or God. The same goes with Kant, Fichte, Schelling, Hegel, etc. So, yeah. That's why philosophy is schizophrenic, because there has to be a distinction between the empirical thinker and the thought which he develops, which is universal and true and independent from his empirical peculiarities and particularities. So basically, the idea of critical philosophy, which refers to Kant mostly, is that before trying to know what God is, or the essence of things, or the soul, etc., etc., one should examine the faculty of knowing, the instrument of knowledge, namely reason, which is immaterial, which is pure thought. And the idea of Kant is basically, if reason proved itself to be inadequate, if it was proven that reason could not grasp infinite objects like God, the soul, the essence of the world, etc., then metaphysics, which before Kant tried to grasp the thought and the truth about these objects, would prove to be a waste of time. And Hegel says, I mean, when I say Hegel, whoever wrote the Encyclopedia, this thought that one should inquire about the instrument before trying to grasp the object seemed very plausible. That's why, in a historical perspective, the Kantian philosophy has had a tremendous success, because people said, yeah, metaphysicians have been quarreling and in conflicts for thousands of years, and now, thanks to Kant, we can get rid of metaphysics because he proved that the faculties of reason were limited and finite, and that we could only know the phenomena, namely the realm of appearance, and not the thing in itself, which is what stands behind the phenomena in the view of Kant. But that's not in the paragraph, but that's a brief commentary. Hegel says that the transcendental ego of Kant proves only that der Verstand, which is the understanding, is limited. That the categories of der Verstand, which is the ordinary thinking that physicists, scientists today still use, that basically everyone uses except mystics, are limited and they cannot grasp the infinite. But it is not because the infinite, which is God, spirit, truth, is ungraspable or cannot be conceptual. It's simply because these categories, as derived and deduced or whatever by Kant, are inadequate. They are not true because they are finite, they are limited. And Hegel's logic, so here's the table of categories. These are the judgments, quantity, quality, relation, modality. I've made videos about Kantian logic, and the table of categories: Quantität, Qualität, Relation, Modalität, namely the software of our mind, basically. The brain would be the hardware, the brain of the thinker can be different, but the software would be identical for all. That was the view of Kant. But Hegel says the categories are finite, they are not derived from one another, there is no logical connection, they are replicated from borrowing the judgments from classical logic. So Hegel says this is not serious. I'm sorry, but I will have to rework your table of categories and to make an entire logical self-unfolding process, die Wissenschaft der Logik, to try to clear and clarify this table of categories. And categories like unity, plurality, totality, reality, negation, limitation, we find these categories in the logic of being by Hegel. The categories of relation, like inherence, subsistence, which is substantia and accidents, Ursache und Wirkung, cause and effect, and Wechselwirkung, reciprocal determination, we find this in the logic of essence. So quality and quantity in the logic of being, relation in the logic of essence, and modality, possibility, impossibility, necessity, contingency, also in the logic of essence in Hegel. And the judgments, we find them in the logic of the concept. So, yeah. And Hegel says that knowledge can only be verified and examined, checked, by going into the process of knowing. You cannot know knowledge before actually knowing. And in the introduction to the phenomenology of spirit, Hegel says that this view, the Kantian view, presupposes that there is the object, which is the absolute, or God, or the infinite, and the subject, and in between there is the instrument of knowledge, namely reason. And he says that if we think that reason is an instrument between the subject and the object, we presuppose that the subject is different from the object. So that I am different from the absolute, which is a delusion. So, yeah. And he uses the example of a scholastic who wanted to try to know how to swim theoretically by studying physics, the determinations of the weight of a body onto the water, the counter force on the water, which makes the body float or sink depending on the quantity of air within the body, the weight, the surface, etc., etc. That's why you have to breathe in, breathe out if you are in water, not to sink, etc., etc. So that would be a theoretical view of learning how to swim. But Hegel says jump into the water and then sink or swim, basically. That's a Hegelian perspective. You will have to learn how to swim, because if you don't, you will sink. So you'd better learn how to swim. So yeah. And then there's a passage, still in the 10th paragraph, saying that, but then Hegel says that the purpose is not to sink completely, it's to learn how to swim, to keep your head above the water, and then to come back onto the shore. And then you can make a theoretical study of the properties of floating bodies, the pressure exerted, the weight exerted on water, the counterweight, Archimedes' principle, the physiology, how you move your body. So Hegel says, do not sink completely. You have to get out of the water eventually to study the properties of physics and physiology. So yeah. And then there has been historically a reaction against this Kantian view by a philosopher named Reinhold, who says that we should philosophize by using hypothetical and problematic judgments and proposition. If, then, maybe, etc., etc. Hypothetical means if, then. Problematic means possibility. This might be, this may be, etc., etc., in order to attain the original truth. So, yeah, in one paragraph, he summarized Kant, Reinhold, the historical context, and the problems of the limitations of der Verstand, although it is not mentioned, but the critique of pure reason is actually the critique of der Verstand, because reason is capable of grasping the infinite. Yeah, that's what I had to say in basically more than 12 minutes about this paragraph, and I will make shorter video, one paragraph at a time. I have worked all day, so I will share my knowledge. It doesn't take me a lot of time because I am studying logic in order to understand how to improve my videos. And the more I study logic, the more I understand many things. So yeah.